Bueno, muy buenas tardes, good morning o good afternoon. Saludos y bienvenida a todos los que aquí presentes en el webinario para el 40 aniversario del histórico proceso judicial iniciado por Nicaragua ante las Cortes Internacional contra los Estados Unidos. En primer lugar, vamos a tener que aclarar unas cosas organizativas para que podamos escuchar todos. Le voy a dar la palabra a Bárbara para que indique en inglés lo que hay que hacer para escuchar la traducción. Bárbara, adelante, por favor.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This webinar is being simultaneously interpreted in Spanish and English. If you need to listen to interpretation, click on the interpretation symbol at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a globe. If you don't see a globe, look for the word More with 3 dots and click on that, and then you should see a globe symbol. So click on the globe icon and that will give you a menu. And at that point, you can click on the language that you would like to listen to. If you need any further help with interpretation, please write something in the chat and one of our tech people will respond to you. Thank you. Stefan?
Okay. Thank you, Bárbara. Yo entiendo que todo el mundo ahora puede escuchar la traducción del castellano al inglés. Estamos, como hemos dicho antes, ahora en el 40 aniversario del histórico proceso judicial iniciado por Nicaragua ante la Corte Internacional de la Justicia de la Haya contra los Estados Unidos. Un acontecimiento que algunos dicen que marcó un antes y un después en la defensa del derecho internacional y de la soberanía de los pueblos. Pero en general, creo yo que no hay un antes y un después. Esto ha sido una sentencia a favor en este caso.
This has been a decision that was one of the few decisions that in favor of a small country. And because of that, the International Court was made in order to support people who oppose the multipolar world. But this isn't our issue today. Today we are here to talk about this decision that was made in favor of the people of Nicaragua, the people that we all love and are the reason that we're here today. We want to thank very sincerely all of you from all the different parts of the world for your presence here with us today, and also thank you for your interest for participating in this collective reflection about an episode that continues to have enormous significance in the current international context. This meeting has been organized together by the European Solidarity, the European Committee in Solidarity with the Popular Sandinista Revolution and Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition. Two platforms which from different geographical and political spaces share the same commitment to international solidarity with Nicaragua, the defense of their revolutionary process, the defense of Nicaragua's sovereignty, and respect for international law. The Committee in Solidarity with the Sandinista Popular Revolution, with a long history, a continuous history of more than 10 years of, and also with people among its membership who have been in solidarity with Nicaragua and its revolution almost since the beginning, immediately following the triumph of the revolution in 1979. Since that time, the committee has carried out intense work to inform and educate about the different ways in which the Nicaraguan people have suffered intervention, outside intervention. Over the last decades, the committee has promoted meetings, solidarity brigades, and activities of political, cultural, and academic nature, and keeping alive the international commitment to Nicaragua. For its part, the Nicaraguan Solidarity Coalition brings together organizations and people from different countries to coordinate together and share rigorously researched information about the reality of Nicaragua. And I want to now introduce Barbara again and give her the floor to tell us more about this organization, the Nicaraguan Solidarity Coalition. Barbara, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Barbara Larkham, and I'm active with the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition, which is an international coalition of organizations and individuals in solidarity with Nicaragua, supporting its sovereignty and affirming its achievements. We're not affiliated with any governmental entity of any nation. Some of you are already active with the coalition, and we invite everyone else to join us now. Find the place in our coalition which is the best match for your particular interests and skills, and we welcome you. You can check out our website regularly for information at nicasolidarity.com. As you may know, the Nicaragua webinars and some other Nicaragua-related activities have been going on for years, but our coalition is younger than that. About 4 years ago, a group of us began meeting monthly to discuss how can we become more effective at countering all of the misinformation about Nicaragua, and even more importantly, how can we collaborate better at spreading all the good news about Nicaragua. Nicaragua is an amazing country in so many ways. Universal free healthcare and education, its gender equality and equity, the amplified voices of indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples, the focused planning to reduce poverty in the country, and so much more. So about 3 years ago, we formed our coalition and approved our official name, Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition, as well as our nickname, NICA Coalition for short. We approved our logo, and we created our coordinating committee, which has grown now to 10 persons in several countries with diverse backgrounds. We invited individuals and organizations to join us, and you can find a list of our organizational members on the About page of our website, which again is nicasolidarity.com. We hold meetings on the second Monday of each month. We publish a bi-weekly newsletter. Our lobbying and advocacy committee is hard at work. We have email and WhatsApp discussion groups, and several of our members are getting their articles about Nicaragua published regularly in various newspapers and magazines. In a minute, I'll post links in the chat about all of this. But we don't focus only on Nicaragua. We've joined other larger networks and coalitions that are working to counter the colonialism and imperialism in the Americas and beyond. For example, the Sanctions Kill Coalition and its Americas Without Sanctions project, and also the Zone of Peace campaign. You can find our coalition's public statements on the About page of our website in support of the sovereignty of Venezuela and Cuba and in opposition to the genocide in Palestine. Please join our efforts. I'll now post several links in the chat for how you can get involved with us. And thank you for everything that you are doing to make the world better. I'll turn it back over to Stefan now. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Muchas gracias, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I want to remind all of our organizations that both of these organizations are committed to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations and respect for self-determination of people. The collaboration of these two organizations on this event is exactly the spirit, international spirit, that continues being as necessary today as it was 4 decades ago. What brings us together today is an event of enormous historic significance. In 1984, Nicaragua brought an application before the International Court of Justice to condemn military and paramilitary actions promoted by the United States against its territory and its peoples. After a long judicial proceeding, the court concluded that the United States had violated fundamental principles of international law. Among those, the prohibition of the use of force, the respect of sovereignty of states, and the principle of not meddling in internal affairs of another country. And they continue doing the same thing, as we can see in Venezuela, for example, and threatening Cuba. They continue every day to meddle. The ruling became one of the most important decisions in the history of contemporary international law. It also showed how a major world power could be brought to an international tribunal, and that international law had the tools necessary to defend small countries against acts of aggression. Although the United States decided not to adhere to the ruling fully, and later made use of its position in the Security Council to impede its execution, this judgment continues being a legal reference and political reference point of enormous importance. Today, it continues to be cited in numerous legal resolutions, academic research, and debates about the use of force, international legal issues, and the respective sovereignty of states. To commemorate this anniversary does not mean just remembering an episode in the past. It also means reflecting upon the validity of those principles in a world where there continues to be conflicts, unilateral sanctions, military interventions, and different forms of pressure against sovereign states. It also invites us to ask ourselves, what should be the role of international law, of the United Nations and the international community to guarantee that norms are applied in a universal way and not selectively? To help us to understand the historical, legal, and political significance of this process, we have a special guest. We have the honor of introducing you to Professor Augusto Zamora Rodriguez. Augusto Zamora is a legal scholar, a diplomat, and a university professor specializing in public international law and international relations. He was Nicaragua's ambassador to Spain, and he has built an extensive academic career as a university professor. He's the author of various books, articles, and research on international law and foreign policy, the United Nations, and geopolitics. His understanding of the case of Nicaragua against the United States is not only academic. Over decades, he has studied the legal and political implications of the case to become one of the leading voices in understanding the importance of that decision and its repercussion in the evolution of contemporary international law. His experience as a diplomat and researcher allows him to offer us a vision that combines legal rigor with direct knowledge of the historic events and their political consequences. We're convinced that we believe that his presentation will allow us to better understand not just what happened 40 years ago, but also how this case continues to be extraordinarily relevant. Before passing the mic over to him, we want to thank all of you again for being here with us for this event, for the organizations that arranged the event, for all of those who are collaborating with the technical preparation and publicity, and especially all of you who are joining us from different countries. We hope that this activity contributes to deeper understanding of one of the most important precedents in contemporary international law and reaffirming commitment to peace, the peaceful solution of disputes, and respect of sovereignty for people. Thank you very much for joining us. And without further ado, it's a real pleasure to hand the mic over to Professor Augusto Zamora Rodriguez. Welcome, Augusto. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Buenas tardes, compañeros, compañeras.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters.
Como nicaragüense, como jurista que he sido toda mi vida.
For me, as a Nicaraguan,
esta es una fecha memoriosa porque yo fui parte del equipo que llevó
and as someone who was part of the team that brought the United States to The Hague, this is a very special day. After such long sessions, doubts beforehand, before we filed our application in 1983, but ultimately Nicaragua was right, and the International Court of Justice did not have any doubts in ruling in favor of Nicaragua. Unfortunately, the speaker has frozen. Apparently, Augusto's connection has frozen. We're going to try to reestablish a connection with him. Apparently, for the time being, it seems to be just Augusto's connection. It seems to me that everyone else can hear us. Is this right? Yes, please give us some signs of life. Okay, I see we are here. Yes. Okay, I see people saying that they can hear. So if the majority of people are hearing us, okay. So you're seeing me here in a forest of Germany. It's very hot here in Germany right now. It's hotter than in Nicaragua. Yeah, these are the kind of technical problems you have with the live event, says Javier. Let's see whether Augusto can reconnect. Apparently, do we have another way to contact him by telephone or telegram or something? Javier is trying to reconnect with Javier, and perhaps someone could present the campaign that we have here in Western Europe. Is Maria from Basque Country here? Can you hear me, Maria? Maria, are you there? Oh, apparently she's not here. Oh, I'm sorry, my connection failed. Okay, you're back with us, Augusto. Yes, and forgive me, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, my screen went black. No worries. That's just a technical glitch. I was just saying that this was really an astonishing event. Let's place ourselves in the context of 1983 to understand the magnitude of Nicaragua's initiative to file suit against the United States in the major legal entity, major court of the United Nations. In fact, no country had done such a thing. Secondly, serious reservations had been expressed over whether or not the ICJ would rule in favor of Nicaragua, because I will not say who, but some colleagues that were consulted at that time recommended that we not do this by thinking of the possibility that a conservative majority of the judges would rule against Nicaragua. And in this way, they would give legitimacy to the United States war of aggression against Nicaragua. However, and I am going to tell you this because I think it should be known, a meeting was held at the Foreign Ministry in early 1983, to which Professor Abraham Chase, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but he attended then. It was a secret meeting at the Foreign Ministry in which Father Miguel de Escoto attended, Professor Chase, and myself. What we were going to discuss at that meeting was the key issue of the proceedings, because we were all clear and all international law experts were certain that if the case got to the merit stage, if the International Court of Justice ruled that it had jurisdiction, then the United States would definitely be convicted given the mountain of evidence against it, because it was an openly, publicly waged war of aggression that was debated in the US Congress and so forth. So there was absolutely no doubt regarding that aspect. The issue was a technical matter. And it was a legal technicality as follows. Nicaragua had accepted the compulsory jurisdiction of the Permanent Court of International Justice of the Society of Nations in the 1930s. Since that court dissolved in World War II, when the United Nations was founded and the International Court of Justice became the successor to the Permanent Court, during the annual book of the court, starting in 1949, they always included Nicaragua as one of the countries that had accepted the compulsory jurisdiction of the court, with a note which read that Nicaragua had accepted the jurisdiction of the Permanent Court of International Justice. However, the decree to confirm that acceptance had never been filed with the court. It had never been received by the court. So there was a major risk that we were taking on with this, and we had to handle that risk. It was a loose thread, but a loose thread in a case of such great magnitude. So Professor Chase was called in precisely to discuss this amongst the three of us. I remember this as if it were yesterday, and Chase explained his impeccable reasoning regarding this note from the court, and he stated with very strong legal arguments that that note gave the court an out to declare itself as lacking jurisdiction. In other words, since Nicaragua had not corrected its acceptance, it had never sent any note ratifying that first telegram. Therefore, the jurisdiction of the court was not clearly established, and the court could say it did not have jurisdiction. And that would have been a political and legal defeat of tremendous magnitude for us. But I responded to Professor Chase based on two fundamental arguments. I believed and continue to believe, and I also satisfied to see that the court confirmed this, but I believe that after almost a half century of including Nicaragua in its yearbook and the list of countries that have accepted the compulsory jurisdiction of the court, it would be very hard for the court to refute its own yearbook, because it was true that Nicaragua had not submitted any formal communication confirming that message of the 1930s to the Permanent Court of International Justice, nor had it sent any message to the ICJ asking Nicaragua to be removed from the list of countries that accepted the court's compulsory jurisdiction. The second argument was the reverse of this. If the United States had filed suit against Nicaragua and Nicaragua had alleged what we were saying the U.S. could have argued, the court quite simply would not have allowed Nicaragua to get out of it, but rather they would say that those arguments were not valid by applying the principle of estoppel, which Nicaragua had had more than half century to say that it did not accept the compulsory jurisdiction, and it never did that. So that was a key moment, because I recall that Professor Chase looked at Miguel and myself with a very happy face, saying, those are strong arguments, and I believe that it is possible to win this case. So it was then decided to move forward and file our application. Most people don't know this, but this was really a key moment in the trial, because the United States used a whole battery of arguments, and they had all of the files. Incredibly, they had all these files that Nicaragua did not have regarding documentation before the Permanent Court of International Justice, but they had it. And they submitted arguments, and they came with a very impressive team of attorneys to say that the court did not have jurisdiction, and therefore it should not admit the case, and that it should be dismissed. And the decision of 1984 decided that issue. That is when the court ruled that it did have jurisdiction and was a competent authority in direct response or in light of the arguments presented by Nicaragua. And once the jurisdiction of the court was established, the United States knew that the merits case stage would be lost. There was no way for any judge to find that the actions of the United States could have been legal. So the United States decided to do something which we had expected them to do, which was withdraw from the case. And other states have done this, but for legal purposes, that doesn't matter very much, because a state can withdraw however the trial goes forward. And it in fact did go forward. And in June of 1986, the court handed down a judgment that, in fact, a U.S. attorney has deemed to be the most important international judgment ever issued by the International Court of Justice. And that's true. The court addressed all the major issues of international law related to the principles of non-use of force, threats, non-intervention, free self-determination of people, the integrity of the national territory. All of this was corroborated in a decision of customary law that was applied to this case. However, the court went even beyond that. And it encompassed issues because the United States put forth a whole series of arguments that they said there were political statements, but they presented them as legal arguments, and the court dismissed them one after the other and really dismantled this approach with a legal statement, which when I reread that statement, it continues to fascinate me. And in this area, I must tell you one thing. The United States is the only country in the world, the only one, that has been convicted by the International Court of Justice for the massive violations of human rights. A political convention or resolution from the General Assembly or from any consultative body, none of those are anything compared to a legal judgment by the International Court of Justice of the UN. And the ICJ's opinion continues to be completely applicable. They also refer to another matter. And at that period in time, it was this was used in many cases to attack countries and governments. And that is the issue of human rights. The United States invoked human rights by arguing that in the case concerning military and paramilitary activities against Nicaragua, as what they needed to do in order to defend human rights. And the court said that, and here, allow me to read it to you because I believe that this today continues to be valid. There is no way around this, and it really should be inscribed in bronze or in granite on all countries of the world. Well, if the United States can have its own assessment of the situation of human rights in Nicaragua, the use of force cannot be the appropriate method to verify and ensure the respect for those rights. It's not the same to say such a thing in for a politician to say this as it is for the highest court in the world to say this. In other words, the court is saying that using force with the pretext of defending human rights is inadmissible. You do not defend human rights by bombing countries, destroying countries, murdering and assassinating thousands of innocents. This is one of the many things because it is a judgment that, in fact, really should be mandatory instruction. And I say, in fact, that it is because I've been a professor of international law almost all of my life. This is the most cited decision in international law in terms of the use of force, in terms of non-intervention, self-determination. This is the most cited judgment in international law, which is called the case of Nicaragua v. the United States of America, because the court set a precedent there. And in international law, whatever the court says is law. And so this judgment established the entire legal framework for the protection and defense of the fundamental principles of international law, starting with the sovereignty and independence of states, their right to self-determination, and a complete prohibition on the use of force, and the defense of human rights in the appropriate terms in which it is considered under international law. We could speak at length about this judgment. In fact, it marked a watershed moment in international law. It is true that the United States withdrew from the case. It is also true that the United States disobeyed it. However, it received a blow because it was discredited. And this was made obvious. After that judgment, there was no way at all to defend themselves. They couldn't show their face. I think that those shameless people don't even have faces, or their faces are made of clay. But the United States was left completely bereft of legal arguments. And that is because Nicaragua in 1986, that decision applies to the case of Iran. Today, it applies to other countries that have been victims of aggression, like so many countries in Africa, and still some countries in Latin America. And it is also valid to remind governments that applaud these types of policies that these are absolutely illegal policies, not because just anyone is saying this or volunteering this information, but rather because the highest legal body of the United Nations said so. In this, we find a pending issue, and I really don't know what the format of this webinar is, whether we're going to have questions and answers, but there is a pending matter, and that is the issue of reparations. In law, it has been firmly established that any state that violates or breaks, impacts, or impairs the rights of any other state has the obligation to pay reparations for the damage caused. And this is a right that cannot be denied and has no statute of limitations. The United States has a tremendous debt. It has many debts. If we charge the United States for each and every one of the laws that it has broken in its acts of aggression against Nicaragua dating back to the 1800s, it would probably clear out the external debt. But in this specific case, that debt established by the ICJ, because the judgment said that the United States has an obligation to pay reparations to Nicaragua for all of the harms and damage caused to Nicaragua as a country and to the Nicaraguans as citizens of that country who have been directly or indirectly impacted by the illegal policy of the United States against their country. And curiously, this would include the Contras themselves, the very puppets of the United States, because many of them were deceived and were themselves victims of the United States policy. If the United States and CIA were organizing the Contras, financing them, giving them weapons, and directing them as the court determined, the Contras would not have existed. They would have never been created. So there is a global overall obligation to pay reparations. It cannot be broken down in parts. Now, because of the circumstances that we're experiencing, Nicaragua cannot seek the enforcement of this payment of reparations, which is really, it belongs to the Nicaraguan people. But it does not expire. It does not have an expiration date. At a certain point in time, this debt will need to be updated. It will need to be indexed. And tens of billions of dollars will be determined to be owed by the United States to Nicaragua for all of the damages that it caused. I could speak much longer. I could tell stories. For example, the Nicaraguan team, there were 7 of us, and we barely filled in the first row of seats at the Peace Palace in The Hague when the United States team arrived. They not only filled up the first row, they filled up about 3 more. And there were about 50 of them, including their attorneys, representatives, advisors, etc. It was impressive. But since we didn't have money, well, we hired a little bus, and that's what brought our team to the Peace Palace, the headquarters of the ICJ. But when the US arrived, it was like a caravan of 40 vehicles. And they came there to make a big show. It was a show of power with their arrogance and their megalomania. I also need to tell you that many people were surprised the virtual unanimity of opinion amongst the judges. In fact, the Japanese judge, who voted against many things, he said that he was voting against some formal matters. However, he didn't need to say anything about the merits of the case because he was so sure that we were right. And he stated that Nicaragua really was in the right. This judgment, well, I know. Well, when you work in this profession, when you get a judgment from the court, you have to read it and comment on it. And sometimes it goes halfway. A judgment by the court might have 5 or 10 articles published commenting on it. But taking advantage of my years as a professor at the Autonomous University in Madrid, I compiled everything that had been published about the 3 stages, the provisional measures, the jurisdictional phase, and the merit stage of this case. I collected all those articles. It was incredible. I have here more than 120 articles commenting on that judgment. You will not find any other judgment that comes anywhere near that number of publications, just counting the number of articles that the Nicaragua case generated. It was really astounding. Another more unique thing about this is that comments came out on this case in journals that actually had nothing to do with international law. In the case of the United States, it came out in administrative and trade law publications, but they published articles on it. Also, articles came out in journals in India and Japan and virtually all of the European countries. So this was truly impressive. It had such a great impact, and there was such astonishment and admiration and the outpouring of articles on the case of Nicaragua. There is no manual that you can find in this world that doesn't 20 or 30 times cite this sentence. I know this because I have looked for this in many of these. And the better the publication, the better the international law textbook is, the more it cites this case. So the Revolution and the Sandinista government provided a tremendous service to our country, but also to international society, to the poor people of the world. We have left a judgment that they can use for their benefit. And I am certain that with the genocide in Gaza, the tremendous acts of barbarity that Israel has been perpetrating against the Palestinian people for some 80 years, when the International Court of Justice finally rules, more than once, they will cite the decision in the Nicaragua case because it lays the legal basis and establishes jurisprudence of the court to convict the Zionist entity of genocide. So even though so many years have passed, since then. The judgment in the case of Nicaragua not only has not lost any of its current applicability, but rather its current events continuously show us the value of it, and it has established an essential legal framework for the defense of the rights of peoples and weak countries, who are the ones that really need to exercise these rights. The strong countries don't need law on their side, like the United States does. And in this regard, the judgment in the case of Nicaragua versus the United States shall be a mandatory reference point in international law as long as international society exists. And I would say that now that we are going through a process of transformation in the world to moving towards a multipolar world, in which the multipolar world will once and for all put an end to the imperialist, interventionist, neo-colonial, and criminal system defended by the United States. I believe that the judgment in the case of Nicaragua will provide a good framework for moving forward to develop and expand the new multipolar international order, which in a few years, perhaps 10, 15, maybe 20, it's hard to know exactly how long, but I know that world will come, and this judgment will be a reference point. And we already have some background in this regard. For example, the countries that have been trampled in Latin America, those who at the OAS were called the 20+1 because the United States was the only one and it could impose its will on the other 20. However, these countries, throughout the first half of the 20th century, are the ones who laid the foundations of international law. With the exception of the experts or academics of the inter-American system, few are aware that the principle of non-intervention was born in Latin America based on Sandino's war against the United States, because at the Sixth International American Conference held in Havana in 1928, when Sandino's war was at its highest point, and the discussion revolved around the struggle for liberation in Nicaragua. And in 1931 in Montevideo, they approved a document based on the War of Sandino, and the Inter-American system also adopted the first treaty on the rights and duties of states, the first diplomatic convention, the first consular convention, and the first one in which it would seem that it was useless, but in the end it became to be the model for the United Nations after the Second World War, because it was the reference point. In the gap that existed in European law, this was the reference point for the new system of international law within the framework of the new world organization. So it was within that framework that it became possible for the Nicaragua versus United States case to move forward. And this case will continue to be a reference point in the new multipolar world that is being built little by little with some setbacks, but without a doubt, cannot be reversed. The economy is already multipolar, and the concentration of wealth that was already used to be in the hands of just the Western European countries is no longer there. The BRICS have more wealth than the G7. And in terms of purchasing power parity, China is the leading world power. Second is the United States. The third is India. The fourth is Russia. So the world is different. But this different world, I believe, can find in this judgment by the ICJ a frame of reference that is very competent and very sound. It is a good basis for building the new multipolar world that international society needs. And when saying this, I thank everyone for listening to me and congratulate the Nicaraguan people who, in the end, are combative people, and the young men and the mandatory military service, the soldiers in the Sandinista People's Army, they were the true protagonists who led us to achieve this victory. All due respect for all of you, and greetings. Thank you very much, Augusto. That's been a very important clarification for us to be able to continue to work with that judgment, particularly now with what is happening, that the United States not only ignores the decisions of the ICJ, but continues to do the same thing that it did to Nicaragua to other countries. It's doing it now in Venezuela, Iran, and threatening to do this to the Socialist Republic of Cuba. So, Javier, would you like to add anything? We have about 3 questions in the chat that we'd like to share with our comrade Augusto. Victor Saiz says, could we remind the court that to remind or demand that the United States comply with its judgment and that it has to pay? Yes, of course you can, says Augusto. Does this have to be at Nicaragua's initiative? No, the court works at the initiative of the states. In other words, the court cannot initiate an action on its own initiative. It must be requested by a state. In this case, it would have to be requested by the state of Nicaragua. And that is coming. The timing of this is also very important. So, and it does not seem that this is a propitious moment for initiatives such as this. And we have another question, one from Rudy Kus. A question about the current time. Do you have information on the new case filed by the Nicaragua against Germany for complicity in genocide? Do you think that Nicaragua will win this case? It certainly has a chance. In the case of Palestine, it is very clear. The legal basis of the arguments are very strong. The UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide is very clear. So in this regard, we could anticipate without a doubt that the court will rule in favor of the Palestinian people. Because in this case, once again, it is overwhelming public evidence that everyone knows about, and the genocide has been more than proven. All right. Okay, I think we've handled the question. I thought the question was more about the Nicaragua's case against Germany. Okay, there's less certainty about that because first you have to prove that Germany in fact collaborated and continues to collaborate. Sale of weapons in and of itself establishes evidence in principle, but is not evidence in and of itself. So we need to wait because it is also a very new kind of case. And with these new cases, the court has to build a new system of evidence, and Nicaragua has to provide this to show the direct link between the policy of general support from Germany to the genocidal state of Israel and the use of the resources and means that Germany provided to Israel for to perpetrate acts of genocide against the Palestinian people. In law, this is called causality.
Okay, we have another question, but they're not in the chat. Maybe the folks in the United States can help. There's a question. I don't know how to see them in the Q&A. Can you hear me? There's still several questions. Yeah, maybe you can read them here. I can't see the questions that have come in through the Q&A. I'm not sure how to do that. Q&A, yes, and questions and answers. You just scroll down, click on it and scroll down. Can you see it there? I see the last ones that have been written in the chat. Look down at to see what's in Q&A. If you don't see it below, you can go to where it says more, or I'm gonna go ahead and read. Kathy Hoyt asks the question, have other countries benefited from the 1968 rulings from the ruling from 1986 in cases before the court? No, not directly, because Nicaragua's case is unique. No one else has brought a similar application before the court. In fact, for general information, the majority of the cases that come through the court deal with border disputes. There are some that are linked to some, like the genocide against Palestine, but not directly to Nicaragua's case, related to Nicaragua's case. The case that's the most similar to the one of Nicaragua's case is the one about Palestine. These cases against Israel and against Germany in the World Court, so that when the judgment, when the court hands down their judgment, they will make reference to the case in Nicaragua. Martha Schmidt has a question.
Do you want me to interpret that, Becca?
No, I can, yes.
Okay, bueno.
Tenemos una sección del Colegio de Abogados que se llama Paz Mundial a través del Derecho. Y esta era una de las entidades jurídicas que estudió el caso. Me interesa saber cómo utilizar el caso para informar al pueblo estadounidense acerca del excepcionalismo estadounidense y sus excusas por violar el derecho internacional. ¿Tiene usted alguna idea de cuáles son los aspectos de la sentencia que serían más útiles para los no abogados? That they are used
Hello, can you hear English?
¿No? Sí,
Yes,
ahora
okay.
¿me escuchan? No es Marta, soy la intérprete que habla. En mi estado de Washington, no se escucha, no se escucha en el canal de español.
Hello, are you listening to the English channel? ¿Se están escuchando el inglés? No.
Hola, no se escucha el canal de interpretación. Hola, no se escucha. ¿Por qué no se escucha? Becca, do you have your microphone on?
No, I have my microphone on.
Hola, ¿te escucha? Hola, ¿te escucha el español? ¿Podría alguien indicar si se escucha el español?
Hello, ¿se escucha en
Sí,
inglés?
Dan escucha.
¿Pueden
Sí,
escuchar
está
en
ahí.
inglés?
Dan escucha. Hola.
Okay,
No.
Nan, can you hear? Can you please read the question in Spanish? So I should clarify something. In the first case, the United States is, as far as I know, the only country where international law is not obligatory. That means that the internal laws of the United States override international law in such a way that very strangely, a lawyer in the United States, a lawyer in the United States would never use international judgments in a case within the United States because within the United States, they don't recognize international law as a priority. US law supersedes international law. So it's very anecdotal. The number of cases, of international cases that would have any standing in the United States. So the law journals, legal journals in the United States have published a huge number of journals that comment on the judgment on the case of Nicaragua against the United States. But many of these articles lament the fact that the legal system in the United States doesn't recognize international law almost anywhere. And so the United States, what it does in these cases, looks for the norm within the United States, and only in a very exceptional cases or in a secondary opinion would ever look for support with international law. And I will repeat that this is the only country that uses that system because the norm is that in the rest of the world, international law has applications or supersedes national law. So if there's an international treaty, it overrides any national law, except for in the United States. And because of that, in the case of Nicaragua, didn't have any any real traction within the United States, because it's only the United States that law that rules within the U.S. For example, the kidnapping of President Maduro, which is a brutal violation of international law and the conventions on protection of people that is signed by the United States. Presidents are people who are internationally protected, but even so, they kidnapped him, they put him in jail in the United States, and the lawyers are looking for ways to release him based on U.S. law, without using international law, because international law has no value within the United States. The United States is a barbarous country, and legally speaking, it's the most barbarous country among all of them. In 1991, did Nicaragua drop the case to negotiate a settlement amount with the U.S.? And is the recent letter to the ICJ reopening it? That's the question. That's a very good question. The truth is that Nicaragua has not renounced the right to reparations, financial reparations. There's not been a legal renunciation of the right to financial reparations by Nicaragua. And because of that, without that, the financial reparations, the right to financial reparations, it continues to be valid. And this is something else that the court might say, because this would be an unusual case. I'm sure that we will find out at some point, because at some point when the circumstances are right, Nicaragua could bring up their case to the court again and expect to get a decision from the court, a verdict from the court. From the Canary Islands, what validity did the pardon of the government of Violeta Chamorro in the United States, did the government of Violeta Chamorro, yes, this is the same answer. So since Nicaragua has not clearly and precisely and indubitably renounced its right to financial reparations, then that debt remains valid and still owed to Nicaragua. But this is an issue that obviously has to be resolved by the tribunal. I think that the right to financial reparations continues to be valid. And so it is something that a grievance that can be demanded. It's another way in which the International Court can step in. The other thing is that the court hands down a judgment, but they don't have any ways in which to ensure that those judgments are adhered to. If there's no norm that says that a judgment from the court that is not adhered to has to be imposed by the United Nations. For example, this could happen. The Security Council has that power. But because the United States has a veto on the Security Council, the possibility that the Security Council would publish something is not going to happen. So the doors are open, the possibility exists, but as long as that veto stands, then it's not going to happen. So we also have now we have our issue for the next meeting, because Danielle proposed the reinvention of the United Nations a long time ago, because there are no real consequences for governments that don't comply with rulings. And so what we have with Cuba and all these other countries, what we have is we have a tiger with no teeth. So let's look at something. I want to be very clear about this. I'm going to repeat what I said before. All of the violations of any legal norms, there has to be, reparations are obligatory. And when it has been a larger breach of international law, then it has to be a larger reparations, financial reparations paid. The United States and the NATO countries have invaded and have bombed and so on and so forth. And all of these are criminal acts against world peace, against humanity. And the case of Nicaragua offers a legal framework so that one day these countries, if they have governments in power who are decisive in wanting to bring forth their grievances to the court. We're talking about Iran, we're talking about Syria, we're talking about Palestine, etc., etc. These countries could bring forth those grievances. They could request payment, financial damage payment. The framework is there. Nicaragua's case gives us this legal framework, a solid legal framework, in order for all of these grievances to bring forth. Any countries that have had these breaches of international law. This would continue without the United States, without any other powers. They have to make these reparations. So we should not consider this to be a dead case, or it's not dead and buried.
Becca, let's switch. Can we switch?
Because they are not Sandinista. Unfortunately, the interpreter could not hear the question. You have to be Sandinista and half crazy to get into something like this. Other countries look at it and are afraid of the challenge, but we're not afraid. But I believe that at some point, the time will come. And let me give you an example. So you can see that things have their own rhythm and timing. The poor countries, particularly those of Asia and Africa, under imperialism in the 19th century and colonialism and the neocolonialism of the 20th century, were looted of much of their artworks. And at that time, those countries couldn't do anything to get their artwork back. And so these were artistic treasures of their peoples that were stolen from them. However, today, in the present, this is something that is now happening, and to a greater and greater degree. There are countries that are taking very seriously the recovery of their looted treasures. It's a slow process. Let us bear in mind, if we look at things in terms of human life, everything is very slow because we are ephemeral, but history moves at its own pace. 40 years ago, it would never occur to any countries to demand that Great Britain or the UK or Germany or France return their looted treasure. But now there are countries doing it. And the time will come when there will be groups of countries that are victims of all of these affronts and attacks by the Western European nations and are proposing and demanding reparations. And if the British Museum or the Bank of London are all left empty, well, so be it. At a certain point in time, they will have to return this treasure one way or another. History is not static and empires are not eternal. And we are currently at a stage of transition, and we should be happily preparing for what is to come. I don't understand this question from Barbara Stewart completely. She's asking, can you comment on the U.S.'s use of personal sanctions on Hague and ICC judges to intimidate and influence them and cut them off from banks, credit cards, travel, etc.? So Nana's reading this, sanctions on the ICC judges versus sanctions on judges in The Hague. Answer. As a nation exercises its sovereignty, countries have the right, the power to establish sanctions and restrictions on individuals, specific individuals, businesses, and societies or corporations for whatever reason. But the nuance is that these sanctions and similar can only be applied in the country of reference. In other words, they do not have international validity. But it's another thing where, because these countries have so much power and some European powers, and because they control international financial systems, international insurance companies, international banking systems, manage to get these sanctions from one country to be applied on others, either directly or indirectly, out of fear for any harm that may be done to them. Therefore, the United States says, I'm going to sanction Russia. They're not allowed to export oil, and anyone who buys oil from Russia will get a 50% tariff imposed. And that's valid in the United States with its relations with Russia, but not the other countries. Countries that have a lot of trade with the United States. They do whatever the United States wants because they're worried about being sanctioned with tariffs or whatever. And this is an effect of the pyramid of powers. These are the effects of what the multipolar world is trying to dismantle. The virtual monopoly that a group of Western powers has over the financial and banking systems of the world. That's what gives them that power. Once that system is dismantled, they can impose whatever sanctions they want, then the other countries will pay no attention to them. For example, the United States tried to get India to honor sanctions with Iran, but no, I'm not a defender of India, but it has to do with the country's power. India can do this. And they said that there are smaller countries with fragile economies that cannot afford the luxury of standing up to the United States. And we also have different scales of power in the international system. It's not the same for a country with massive migration to another country, and that depends on trade with that country to do so, because these are various mechanisms. And this is how the international society functions. And that's why the multipolar world wants to change this and put an end to that. Now, in terms of the judges, there is some relationship. In Europe, just to give you an example, international law prevails over domestic law. So here in Europe, no court would agree to put an abducted president on trial because since there are international standards that protect him and the abduction itself was a crime, no one here would accept that case. In fact, even if they did so, they would be, if it were, they would be, the kidnapper would be considered the criminal and they would be sought for that. But in the United States, since they don't care anything about international law and the judges are so absolutely shameless, they are completely bereft of morality and ethics. They conceive of putting on trial someone who was kidnapped. It is an international crime, and it is even a crime within the criminal code of the United States. These kinds of things only happen in the United States, only in the US. So that is the philosophy of the savage Westerner, the cowboy who wants to impose the law at the point of a gun. Before they were shooting down and killing indigenous people. Now they're doing it against anyone. But the system is the same. Violence is imposed, and the U.S. legal system moves on the basis of that violence. And things that are legal in that country, in Europe, the people involved in these acts would be imprisoned for doing what they've done to President Maduro. We have to put things in their place. And now, did you touch on now that you brought up President Maduro, do you have any opinion that might help those of us solidarity activists in the United States to have an idea of what path to follow? To help Maduro get back to Venezuela or raise awareness amongst more people in the United States? I recommend that you go to the Convention on the Rights of Internationally Protected Persons. That convention was signed and ratified by the United States. Any defense of Maduro in principle should start there. It should be the framework because it is the kidnapping, the abduction of a head of state. It violated the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Venezuela, which is another international crime. Over 100 people were murdered in that action. All of those are crimes that is aggravated murder, premeditated. It is a crime under any rules. It was a mafia-style operation perpetrated by a state. That has a name. It is called state terrorism. And that's the framework. That's what I'm telling you. In Europe, no one would think of having a trial under those circumstances. Everyone who was involved in it would be in prison here. In the United States, they're laughing all the way to the bank. They say, oh, we have a judge. Any honest judge would say, I refuse to hear this case because it's based on a crime, all kinds of 2, 3, 4 crimes, all of the 100 murders. How can we place on trial a man who was kidnapped, the president of the country, and who was brought here by force? And it was an act of extreme violence that cost the lives of about 100 people. Only that could happen in the United States, my God. Stephanie and Javier have a question or comment. I don't know how we're doing with time. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I also asked a question. Yes, I think that this should be the last question, Javier saying from Gran Canaria, what is the posture of the OAS regarding the judgment in the Nicaragua case? That judgment was supported and backed by everyone else. It could not go any other way. Some might have been against it, but it's irrefutable. A decision by the International Court of Justice is, as the UN Charter says, final and without appeal. You don't need to back it any more than that. You seek support when there is lack of application of a judgment, when it is disobeyed, in other words, which occurred here. But no sensible person takes a position against the International Court of Justice. That would be a very politically bad position. The whole world supports it, but the battle continues to be getting the countries to obey these decisions, particularly to pay for the damages they have caused. Javier and Stephanie, is there time for Augusto to say a few closing remarks? Of course. And we also need to have the closing remarks, because just recently Donald Trump said that he doesn't need international law. He just tears it up. That's exactly what he said. So, Augusto, perhaps you could tell us something to wrap up that point. I would like you to understand that we're currently experiencing a period of transition. It's a change of system. Perhaps the biggest that international society has experienced in the past 500 years. It's not one empire getting replaced by a new one. Rather, it's a change of system in which the Western powers are being displaced by Asian powers, and a number of countries from around the world are changing things to have a different societal model. I'd also like to point out something. Latin America, our region, is deeply influenced by the United States for geographical reason. We're not only, our position isn't only geographic, it's also political. We are separated by the rest of the world by two oceans. And this, amongst many other effects, had the effect of getting us to believe that the United States is more than it really is. And it also makes it hard for us to understand the magnitude of the change taking place in the world. This is most clear in China, India, Southeast Asia, and in Africa. But in our region, it's very hard for people to see this. In other words, the ideological control of the United States is so overwhelming that we seem to be like an isolated continent. But the world is changing. The power of the United States, as we are seeing now in Iran, is power on the decline. And no one can stop that. The largest economic and political power in the United States is China, but also in military terms, China is the largest naval power in the world as well. Russia today has the strongest army in the world. The war in Iran has shown the serious limitations that the United States has in terms of military might. And all that drivel that Trump says about this or that, no one believes him anymore. Okay, so he said another crazy thing, but in the end of the day, they cannot win. So let's look towards the future with hope. It might come to us a little bit later because for geographical reasons, but the time will come. The change will come. And Trump says that he wants to belittle international law. Well, we'll see what happens to him in time, because I believe that at a certain point in time, all of the criminal Zionist genociders are going to come before a new Nuremberg trial to respond to their many crimes. And that's a bit. Brothers and sisters, thank you very much. Warm embrace to everyone. And that's it. Thanks. Barbara, could I ask you how we're doing with time?
We have gone for 100 minutes, I believe, as of now. And so I don't know how much time you had allotted that you wanted for this webinar. Were you planning also to say something more about your campaign?
Yes, we had talked about that earlier before the problem with the technical issues, to talk about the campaign with Europe, the campaign Nicaragua Must Be Respected, trying to gather signatures about this case, and Javier will talk about that in just a minute. Stefan, are we okay with time? Do I have 5 minutes to speak? Yes, I think so, because we don't have a particular time we have to finish. So I think the end will be determined by what's important. So this is important. We need to speak about this. Okay, so I wanted to present our international campaign, Nicaragua Must Be Respected. And this has to do with the historic debt that the United States has with Nicaragua, which is still valid, is not something that stays in the past. And Nicaragua continues to reclaim its rights. This reality, out of this reality comes the Nicaragua Must Be Respected campaign, which is an initiative that is promoted by the European Committee in solidarity with the Sandinista Popular Revolution. And the campaign is very simple. I'm sure that any international organization can share it. It has to do with the sovereignty of peoples, and it also has to do with ensuring the compliance of the ruling of the main legal body of the United Nations. I'm not going to go back over the history of the ruling because Compañero Zamora already did that, but I do want to just mention what has been happening since 2007, which is when the FSLN, the Sandinista National Liberation Front, come back into government in Nicaragua. That was when many of internationalists began to talk about this claim and say that this claim before the court has not disappeared. And this grievance began to take a prominent place in the external policies of Nicaragua. And since then, the government of Nicaragua has continued to remind the international about the judgment from the International Court, that it remains valid and that it has never disappeared. Comandante Daniel Ortega has made reference to this historic debt in many public speeches, insisting that the lack of compliance with this judgment is a question of justice and respect of international law. Also, Nicaragua has brought this claim forward in different international forums, in particular in the United Nations, where it has condemned in compliance with the judgment and called for respect for its sovereignty. And it's very important to say that because sometimes the idea comes about that this case has been closed many years ago, and when the government of Violeta Chamorro supposedly gave up claim to that. And it's very clear that that's Nicaragua has never renounced its right to financial reparations, and that this judgment remains valid. So we're not talking about a new claim. We're talking about the lawsuit that has continued to be in effect during these last 2 decades since the return to power of the FSLN. So the campaign for Nicaragua must be respected comes about after the 10th meeting of the European Solidarity Committee in 2024, and we launched the campaign in 2025 with a clear objective to internationalize this historic claim. And so in 2025, we put this campaign, launched the campaign. We have a very clear objective to internationalize this claim, this historic claim, to mobilize organizations, unions, social movements, academics, and intellectuals in order to demand compliance with the judgment from the International Court of Justice. So what does this campaign seek? We want the United States to comply with the judgment handed down by the court. We want to call for reparations for Nicaragua and also defend the sovereignty of Nicaragua, defending a principle of sovereignty and non-interference and non-meddling in the internal affairs of other countries. And so last year, as I said, in 2025, we began gathering signatures. And in the meeting we had last year in Spain, in Catalonia, we said what we need to do now is to strengthen this campaign. And now the important part of this campaign is to, we're moving into a second level of the campaign, more platforms, more committees to join and give their endorsement of the campaign and bring it more to an international level. So that's why we have our compañeros from the United States here with the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition, and they felt it was important to also support this campaign and bring it into current debate. So in addition to bringing forth this campaign, we also want to gather material, opinion articles, video conferences like this one, or audiovisual information that can inform people about what happened in Nicaragua in the 1980s during this trial, and create audiovisual material that could be distributed through social media. And so that's what we're working on. We want everyone to join that campaign and to share about the campaign. So that's my presentation about the campaign. Thank you very much, Javier. I think it's important also to highlight that it's not, we just don't want to gather signatures. We want to gather signatures. We want to speak to people and talk about this judgment that is 40 years old. And often we talk with people who weren't even born yet when the court handed down their decision. And so this is a way to promote in all areas, talk about this, share information about this ruling, and to bring it back into conversation in light of the current international situation. I think that the collective here today, with everything we have online, this conference has been very fruitful, and I believe that we can work more in solidarity with Sandinista Nicaragua. And I want to invite all of you to join us again for the next activity that we bring about, talking about these issues. I want to thank everyone who has joined us here today, and especially thank Augusto Zamora for being here with us today. And that's it for now. We need to continue on with our campaign. Nicaragua must be respected. Don't give up, and don't sell out. And until next time, hopefully we'll see each other in Nicaragua for the anniversary of the triumph. See you soon.